Born on 28 June 1491 at the Palace of Placentia in Greenwich, Henry Tudor, later to be Henry VIII, was the third child and second son of King Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. Not much is known about Henry's early life, as he was not expected to become king, with little official attention being given to his birth. Instead, his elder brother Arthur was first in line to the throne of England, and all eyes were on him. Henry was apparently so forgettable to the royal family that his grandmother made a mistake writing his year of birth in the family record book, as can be seen pictured here. Henry was not the heir, instead he was the spare, and he was treated as such. Rather than being drilled in the serious ways of kingship, Henry's childhood until age 13 was spent adored and indulged with his sisters under the care of their mother Queen Elizabeth of York and grandmother Lady Margaret Beaufort in a nursery household of mostly women at Eltham Palace. This happily spoiled and indulgent upbringing likely shaped Henry to value love, his passions and romantic ideals over all other things, which would later have a huge impact on his personality once he'd become king. Meanwhile, his elder brother Arthur was never brought up around his mother at all. He was instead sent away to Ludlow Castle in the Welsh Marches to learn how to be a king in a very masculine environment. Henry was taught to read and write by his mother and was afterwards given a first-rate education from leading tutors. He became fluent in Latin, French, and knew some Italian. He studied history, poetry, and tales of chivalry and courtly love, including a range of other subjects, forming a well-rounded education fit for a prince. It was probable that young Henry was destined for a career in the church. With monarchs deemed to have been chosen by God, physical punishment of royal children was out of the question, so a whipping boy would have received Henry's punishment instead if he was being naughty. The two would have grown up together. Seeing his friend receive beatings on his behalf was meant to stop young Henry from future misbehavior. Until the age of 10, Henry would have lived something of a carefree life as a royal prince, enjoying many freedoms his older brother was denied, who was being groomed for kingship by their father. As a young man expected to master many skills, Henry displayed an admirable degree of intellectual curiosity, religious devotion, and athletic achievement. He was an excellent poet and musician, playing well on the lute and harpsichord. He wrote the famous song titled Pastime with Good Company, possibly as young as his teenage years or even earlier. The song, also known as the King's Ballad, became popular across Renaissance Europe during his time. In 1499, the renowned Renaissance scholar Erasmus travelled with Thomas More to the royal nursery at Eltham to visit 9-year-old Henry. He noted that the young boy was already with a certain royal demeanour and a dignity of mind combined with a remarkable courtesy. During the visit, the infant prince demanded that the great scholar should write him a poem. This request caught Erasmus off guard, and he hurriedly wrote the poem over the course of 3 days, so to not disappoint Henry. Henry's education was modern, thorough, and unusually prolonged. It gave him a deep understanding of religion and the classics. But Henry was not only well educated, he was also made to engage in many areas of bodily exercise as part of his regimen. He excelled in the sport of jousting, was extremely fond of tennis, was known to wrestle, and was very fond of hunting. He could not spend a day out hunting without tiring 8 or 10 horses, which he stationed in the area he was to hunt beforehand to maximize their stamina. It was claimed he could draw a bow with greater strength than any man in England. He had a large frame and, standing at 6 feet 2 inches, towered over many people. He also boasted a handsome appearance, and his calf muscles were said to be particularly impressive. In 1502, Henry's elder brother Arthur died of an unknown illness at the age of 15. not long after his marriage to the Spanish princess Catherine of Aragon. Catherine had the illness at the same time but had fortunately recovered. The 10-year-old Henry, whose beloved mother had died in February 1503, was now under the sole influence of his father, who took care to keep him out of the public eye under strict supervision. Having lost 2 other sons, Henry VII may have been overly concerned for the safety of his one remaining heir. But other theories suggest the king was suspicious of his young, talented son. One of the king's servants suggested that the king feared that his son might in his lifetime obtain too much power. As a result, Henry was to ascend to the throne without training in how to be a king. Henry was to spend much of his time in a room next to his father's bedchamber, unable to leave the palace without chaperones and only by way of a private door into the park. Henry VII died on the 21st of April 1509, and the 17-year-old Henry was crowned king as Henry VIII. He married his brother's widow, Catherine, saying that it had been his father's dying wish that he do so. Henry claimed that he was descended from Constantine the Great and King Arthur and saw himself as their successor. Just 2 days after his coronation, Henry arrested his father's 2 most unpopular ministers, Richard Empson and Edmund Dudley. They were charged with high treason and were executed in 1510. Henry VII had been shrewd, calculating and suspicious, having won the throne of England during the bloodshed and instability of the Wars of the Roses. His policy as king was to maintain peace and to create economic prosperity. His control of the nobility and ruthless tax policies, which had relied in part on men like Empson and Dudley, made England a highly prosperous kingdom. Because of this careful reign, his son Henry VIII came to the throne in 1509 with no opposition, inheriting a wealthy and relatively peaceful kingdom. Contemporary sources reveal that Henry VIII was not close to his father, particularly after the deaths of Arthur and Elizabeth. Henry VII was careful, calculating and thrifty, while his son was larger than life, extravagant and vigorous. He quickly reversed many of his father's policies once in power. But Henry VII did influence his son in some ways, namely the importance of having a male heir and a need for suspicion at court, a trait seen openly in Henry VIII later in life.